Hey there, this is Luke Simons with Salt Strong. Have a awesome webinar here. I have Paul Michele with Navionics here. He's going to give an awesome tutorial to show really how we can utilize the Navionics software to just really help us catch more fish. And really excited. So Paul, thank you so much for being here.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity. I've seen a lot of your guys post out there as far as, satellite imagery, and this is how you use it for kayak. And it's an opportunity to reach out to you guys and say, hey, can I talk a little bit about contours and help you guys learn a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the satellite imagery, we've done a lot of tutorials on that, and it's awesome. But it's awesome only for areas where there's clear water, and once you get too deep, you really can't tell much. So that's where this extra level that we're going to go through today is really helpful. And yeah, thanks again for going through it. So I think you have a slide. Is that right? You have some slides to go through?
Yeah, I've got some slides. I figured I'd try to grab some of the more common questions that people ask about, how to read a map and how to read, contours to catch more fish. So I put a little something together here. I'll share my screen here with you. All right, so I'm going to run through, and by all means, interrupt with some questions. But kind of figured I'd start off at least who Navionics is. If your viewers aren't sure, Navionics, we're the largest worldwide boating and fishing chart company. So we do all the charts for the GPSs, everybody but Garmin. And we have the #1 selling navigation app actually on the iTunes Store and Google Play, not just marine, but actually on navigation. So over 7.5 million apps. And we've got the largest database of marine and lakes. So anybody that's watching this, that's inshore, offshore, freshwater, this all can pertain to you from what we do. So just first question I always get is, people look at contour maps and say, what do these lines mean? So each line on a bathymetry chart, which is what we call a sonar chart, is 1 foot contour out to 80 foot. You get past 80, it's 3 foot, 400 to 450, 6 foot, and 450 to 10 is, or 450 plus is 10 foot. So the thing to remember, and I'm going to show you some examples, is the darker, the thicker the line is, the steeper that drop, because each line is 1 foot. So when it gets real tight, it becomes very thick and very dark. That's indicating a ledge. That's a fast drop off. So as long as you remember kind of what each line makes, a lot of it, this will make sense. So we'll go right to ledges. So I put a nice big giant green arrow there for everybody to see where the ledge is. So you can see how that gets a little bit thicker. So that's an inshore ledge, and that's showing you where it's a steep drop-off, where we know fish like to hide, whether they're snuggled up against it or it's snapper or grouper, they're dug up under there. But that's what your ledge looks like. One of the keys to actually fishing ledges is understanding your tidal movement as well. So for example, you've got two different ways, and I put a red and a green arrows there, depending on how your current's going. If you've got your tide and it's going the way the green arrow is, you want to anchor about where that green arrow is, put out your chum if you're chumming for snappers, or you're casting your lure, so it goes into the ledge and pulls those fish out. If the tide's going the other direction, and you drop where the green is, well, you've completely missed that contour. You're not on the fish. So you set where that red line is, and the red arrow, anchor up, drop your chum or cast your lures, and you're going to be just ahead of that ledge. You're going to pull the fish up that are on the ledge, or ones that are already there, and you're keeping yourself in the strike zone. And that's where these maps are really important, understanding tide and where your anchor as well, because if you're not on the spot, you're not going to catch the fish.
Yeah, that's a good point there too. And back to that map, the lowest level, the shallowest was, what is that, 10 feet, I think, or maybe?
On that one there, off to the left there, you've got a 16 foot, and you've got a 21 foot. So that's a little bit of an inshore area there.
Yeah, but so there's no way like a Google map, like a satellite map, would ever show you this type of information. So that's the benefit of having some software like this.
Correct. Yeah, you're going to be able to see, with Google, like you say, you can see some of the reefs, and you can see where, the water gets a little bit darker, but to know exactly where that little ledge is, you'd never see that on Google. Yep. So, and this is kind of what you're actually looking for. If this is a picture of that particular area, so you can see that there's bait fish on top of the ledge, there's the fish hovered up underneath it, and there's a game fish school sitting off. So most likely at this time, you can see your thermocline and the arrows pushing down. That's your tide going that way, and that's why you want to anchor up on top of the ledge, because those fish have pushed off a little bit. So we look at another one, which is rises and lumps. And you can see right here, you've got the little tide, that's the contours that are going around. There's that little circle where I've got my big green arrow. That spot right there is 15 foot. And if you look off to the sides, it drops off, steep kind of up towards the upper left here. You can see my cursor up to this area here, drops off a little. Down here, it's not quite as dramatic, and this is almost just like a slow point. So with this one, same thing with your tide. Think about where you want to anchor. So you've got where you want to fish. You've got your steep ledges here. When your tide's coming this way, it's pushing up and creating an upwelling. So your fish are going to either sit right here or right around the corner off this lump. Other direction, you want to be over here. Again, you want to always remember that tide on those contours where it comes up is pushing bait fish up and over. So the fish are either going to sit right there where the fish get pushed up and eat them, or some of them might sit at the backside if there's a hole there and just wait for it to come over the bar. You know, if they're feeding on shrimp, redfish, they're going to sit right back there and just eat everything that rolls over the sand. Or a little more aggressive fish, if this is offshore and it's a kingfish, like the one behind me, he's most likely going to be in front of that lump. He's going to hammer something as soon as it comes over that.
Awesome.
Now a little bit more for inshore. So this is a very popular area here in Jupiter, Florida, where everybody likes to snook fish when the big spawners come in. So you see a lot of the boats just anchored through the inlet. And it's, well, why are they anchored there? And these are the more popular holes that those fish sit in. So when those snook come in, they like to lay in those holes. And you've got here to the far left, you've got a 19-foot hole. And then it's, you know, just average depth. All of a sudden, here's a little 14-foot hole. And this one's great. This ledge right here, you've got a steep ledge. Again, remembering how dark those lines are. Dark ledge, and you've got a hole right next to it. So now you've got a little current break, and you've got a hole they can sit on with a ledge they can dive under. So these are the kind of structures, there's even one down the bottom here, that you want to look for. There's a nice sandbar in blue. Okay, so this is showing shallow water where this is blue is, dumping into a hole. So here's a feeding station where, again, that current's going to bring it over. Those fish are going to lay in that hole and feed.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, that's huge for especially snook fishing too. They almost always are hunkered down in those holes looking for an easy meal. That's awesome.
I fished those a couple times in my past here in the last year or two. Boca Grande, popular area. You know, a lot of people go and fish tarpon. I used to fish the tarpon tourneys down there quite a bit. And, you know, we always talk about drifting certain holes and drifting certain ledges. And just like you said, it's like the snook. They're going to lay up against the ledges out of the current a little bit. They're going to lay in the holes, and that's where they're going to just hang out or even feed. So the arrow here to the first arrow here to the left, the bottom left, is showing a couple of those very popular holes, the 53-foot hole, 51, there's the 52. Then as you drift back, you can see the 52 with that steep ledge right there. So that's where your water's falling off that ledge, and those tarpon will sit there, and that's a lot of times where you see people fishing crabs. Tarpon are waiting there, waiting for those crabs to come off that ledge, sit in that hole, and they catch a lot of fish in that area as well. So all these lines, I mean, I could spend, 15 minutes on this slide alone, just the amount of ledges that are in through here, shallow points that are sticking up. You've got this giant bar that's up here that if your tarpon goes on there, he's pretty much bull shark bait. So you want to avoid this one. But all these contours, when you look at it, just got to think of it as a desert. When you see nothing but flat and you start seeing lines, that's a change. And that's where these fish are going to hide.
Yeah, and a lot of those ledges, especially there, I've even just put down some small greenbacks, and there's a surprising large amount of grouper and good mangrove snapper too, and they're exactly on those dark lines. It's all about finding those ledges, and there's all sorts of rocks and crazy stuff down there.
Yeah, Pass is amazing. You're right, snapper, grouper. I mean, big kings getting there in the springtime. I mean, it's just about everything rolls in there.
Yep.
Incredible fishing area. Inshore bars, troughs, and holes. So a lot of people that kayak are doing a lot of flats fishing. So this one here has got a few different variables to it. So right over here on the side, on the left here, you've got these green areas. The green indicates a drying area. So at low tide, that's mud. So you can figure, these areas here, if you're looking for redfish in particular, when the tide comes up, good chance they're going to be on there, especially with the oyster bar that's right there as well. Why I picked this particular spot with the two arrows is you've got a little feeding trough that comes through. You've got a channel that comes through that's dumping into 9 foot. So again, like we talked about on the other ones, you've got a hole for those fish to sit in, especially at low tide where all that water's coming off and those fish need somewhere to go. The other one that's kind of a little hidden one is right above the small arrow here to the left, there's a 5-foot hole. So now those fish that are sitting maybe not in the channel but back off a little bit, they're sitting right off the oyster bars looking for shrimp, looking for crabs, and they're sitting in this hole right here that's just begging for you to throw a little jig in there. We run over here to the X's. Now, the reason I put 2 X's here, of course, X marks the spot. You've got your sandbars here. Well, right behind the sandbar, this is the slow drop into a 7-foot hole. Everywhere else, 5 foot, 4 foot, 3 foot. Here's a deep hole. So this area, this could have redfish at low tide, could have a snook, could have a tarpon laying there, certainly would have a shark down there more than likely, sitting off the edge of a sandbar, and even through this trough right here. This is where maybe your snook more than likely you're going to gather, because you've got this 5-foot trough flowing into a shallow, so the current here is going to move fast and then dump into this 7-foot hole. So a lot of your very active game fish will be up in this X, where some of your more neutral ones will be sitting down here in the deep hole.
Good stuff.
Your contour sandbar, simple enough to see. Big bright blue area on the chart. You can see it come up like a rise, just like we were talking about earlier on the humps. This one just happens to be set off a channel, but of course it's always important to know where your sandbars are, whether you're boating or just fishing. Dramatic changes. Now this often, I get a lot of questions on this, often confuses people. Like, there's too much, I don't understand what's going on. You've got 2 different arrows here that I have pointed, a little squiggly arrow going through. So one thing I want to point out is, again, if you look at not just the contours, but what those spot soundings are, which is your depths in there. So that little squiggly arrow I drew is your tide. So the first arrow here at the bottom is a 61-foot hole. Well, right up here at the top arrow is a 50-foot lump. So what do you think's happening with this current, with this ledge? You see how tight this ledge is? So this current coming up here is ripping through, because it's running along that ledge, hits a little bit of this deep hole, and then it hits this button and kicks off, and you're going to have real strong current through here. Well, look what's behind it is an eddy. So here's your little eddy that's sitting behind outside of the current along a ledge. This right here ought to have fish stacked on this ledge, just waiting for them to come around on the current side. Same thing on this one. Current's running here. It's going to push right into the deep hole. Here's where you want to sit in the deep hole if your current's gone the other direction. So look for those changes when you're on your contours, because that will indicate exactly what's happening, where those fish are going to sit. This is a perfect example, because again, here's this back eddy. If there's anybody that does freshwater trout, there's not really here in Florida, or saltwater, but anyway, that's what people always look for, is that riffle or the back eddy. Same thing, your back eddy to your area.
This is the same premise too that we teach in the shallow water stuff, right? You find an oyster bar, find either a point, right, a break in the current, and the same exact thing applies here. It just all happens to be underwater, but the same exact principles apply. They're almost always going to be the best feeding zones in the region. That's fantastic.
100%. Yeah, it's just a little break area and somewhere to hang out and let the food come to you.
Yeah, everybody wants things the easy way, right? And so do the fish.
Exactly. I mean, if you looked at it like it was land, to your point, that's a big hill. And you're tired, you're going to sit on the outside of that hill out of the wind. You get tired of getting blown around when the hurricane comes. You can go hide over there.
Absolutely, and there's food. There's food flying by right next to you. Or just go out a couple feet and grab a meal, and then get back in the eddy.
Here's a cheeseburger. I'll have that today. I'll let the chicken nugget pass on by. I'm gonna wait for the T-bone a little while.
T-bone, I love it.
So reefs, again, one of the things to kind of break down what you're looking at. There's 3 different areas that I chose on this one. The first one on your left is your bigger green arrow. This, as we learned earlier, dark line. This is your ledge. So you've got a ledge right there, which the fish are going to sit against. You've got 2 high holes, perfect ledge. You can anchor on either side depending on your tide. Your green arrow in the middle is indicating a little channel way. So this right here is where your main current's going to run through. You can see how it's cut out as it comes through. This is your main area. You've got a few ledges in between. You've got some, high points that you want to hit, but this is your main current trough. So like we talked about, or you mentioned actually, Luke, is over here is a deep hole. Here you can sit out of the current, hang out and wait. That's where the fish are going to be. The long one, the reason I picked this one, again, this is for like a long drift, or if you're doing some chumming, if you're snapper fishing, or you're trying to say, okay, I'm just going to bounce a jig along the bottom. See how this is a nice, steady ledge all the way down. So right along here, your fish can be running back and forth along this highway, or they may just be sitting up waiting for something to come off. But this is just a nice long piece of structure that these fish will swim up and down. So you could get, if you're talking kayak, get in your kayak and you're up here and just drift this whole section, because those fish are going to be running this edge, waiting for something to come off the other side. If there's anybody watching that's offshore trolling, one of the things I always point out is everybody says, oh, the dolphin 130 feet. I'm going to go out there and just float around and drift in 130 feet. Well, yeah, they're going to eventually be in there. But if you can narrow down those locations to where they're going to be spending a little more of their time or feeding, you're better off. Now, I circled one off to the right here. This is now out in about, I want to say that's around 260. But there's a little cut in the bottom. Now, maybe it's 260 feet deep. But even this little cut is going to cause some upwelling. There's going to be a difference. There's going to be a rip line. It's going to hold weeds. It's going to cause fish to kind of bubble off the bottom. It's going to be a feeding station. Same thing below your green arrow. There's a lump there. We already talked about lumps in the upwelling. So when you're trolling and you see any change of the contours, even to your left of the circle here, that's still a change. This is still coming in deep water in the shallow. The current hits that even at 200 and some feet. It causes a disturbance, and it's different than anywhere else around it. You look around, this is just a big open flat up in the top. Even this little circle is going to have just a little bit of impact on that and will cause a feeding station. And then contours and points, these are your points you're looking for. If you're not sure what a point looks like on a chart, this one's about as easy as you could ever find. You can see clearly by the red arrow, that's just a piece that's sticking right out. As we talked about as far as staging, you can be on the front side of the current, the back side. There's a little cutout in the eddy here. So points always have fish. You know, if you're fishing any of the mangroves, and as you know, that current washes up on that point, there's usually fish around there. So this is what your points look like underwater. You know, here you've got some holes. This is inside a river. If you're fishing any of the rivers, St. Lucie River up the Chokoloskee, or, you know, you're tarpon fishing down the Everglades. These kind of things here, you've got a hole here. Note the contours again. They're kind of closing into a little hole. This is a spot where you've got current coming. Where you want to anchor is X marks the spot. So that current's coming that direction. You're putting your baits right into that hole and drifting back to them or coming up through. Same thing on the reverse. If your current's on the other side, these are what you're looking for on your holes, especially as we know on that outgoing tide. When those fish are at low tide, they've got to go somewhere. You know, down here on the hard turn, this is obviously, again, dark lines. There's a ledge. That's telling you that current's ripping out a cut right there. So those fish are going to be right off the edge of that cut or hiding under that ledge. So these are the areas you want to look for when you're in the river. You know, and I talked about the anchoring on there as well. That little red shows the hole. So, look, I know this is one of the things you've mentioned you've done a lot on, which is your satellite overlay.
Yep.
And, you know, we have on our app, again, the Navionics app, and we also have if you have a GPS, we call this a platinum chart. But to your point, you can see on the left is your standard map. The one on your right is your satellite overlay. And the satellite is a big advantage, you know, as you've talked about a lot. I mean, especially on the bottom right one. I think I've shown that particular area, the Alafia River, it's got to be 1,000 times by now, because you look to the left, it's like, there's a bunch of land, and you go to the right, and there's an entire creek you can fish back there that I personally know is loaded with snook and redfish.
Yeah, I've been back there myself. That's a good area.
So one thing you can do to kind of combine what you've talked a lot about and what I'm focusing on the contours is you can actually shade down those contours, you know, via on our app or on the platinum charts, where you can then see the contours below what's on Google Earth or whatever satellite imagery you're using. In this case, it was Bing. But you can see where you've got your satellite imagery. You can see the reef. In fact, there's a little dive flag right here that shows, hey, look, this is a dive spot, which happens to be right on that reef. And by the way, look where he has the flag. It's right by a ledge. I wonder why that is. So here's your combination of two, your overlay, your contours, and some very nice guy that decided to tell us that's where he's diving for lots of
Yeah, that's cool. I like this is the combination of really the satellite imagery and the deeper water, you know, the ledges. And this is kind of the blend between, hey, the shallow stuff, you can kind of get the best of both worlds.
I agree. I mean, especially if you're up in Chokoloskee or those areas, I mean, it's really nice to be able to go in some of those creeks and go, okay, I mean, everything looks the same. You get lost back there for days. But to be able to find a spot that narrows it down, to your point, well, I think there's a reef here, but is there some structure on it? Mm-hmm. It's the difference of fishing above where that dive flag is, where there's a little bit of contours, to fishing right there where that ledge is going to be night and day.
Absolutely. The benefit of technology.
It changes literally every couple months. Some of the stuff that comes out and that we're able to do and that we see on contours and overlays, I mean, it's unreal. It's just unreal.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about your system. I guess we haven't touched on it, but the fact that it is ever upgrading, ever updating, that's a very powerful part of it.
Yeah, we actually do 2,000 updates per day on our charts. So you can either update your card if you have one, or if you've got the Navionics app, you just redraw your little box and it updates it. You can even record sonar if you've got a GPS and actually send those logs, and we'll update the charts. or something we call Sonar Chart Live, which is where you can draw live contours as you're boating along. And, you know, if it's an area that you found on Google Earth and it's not mapped and you're curious what the bottom looks like, you can map it as you're just scooting along. Or in the case of who's missing with us today that apparently broke his.
Yeah, Tony was supposed to be here, but he's stuck with a broken paddle, having to paddle into the wind with one.
Well, in his case, he could map the bottom while he's towing his kayak.
Yeah, I can't.
So this is I'm sorry, guys. So this is one of the features on the app, actually, and that was a nice segue on the depth highlight, where you can actually highlight areas. So you say, you know what, I want to focus on, you know, an area that's 2 foot to 5 foot, and you can highlight that in the app to where you know that it's white. That's where you want to stay. The other one is if you want to adjust your water levels based on tides. So everything on the Navionics apps are at mean low tide. But let's just say that there's, you know, a severe flood tide here in Florida and it's 11 feet high. Well, that same area we just looked at, now 11 feet higher, you can see how that's changed. Conversely, if we had a massive, you know, fallout on tide and it went 10 feet low, well, all that's land. But hey, the good spot is right up here. I'm pretty sure all our fish are trapped right in this little pond. So let's take a little hike and you'll whale on them. So it's a good way to look and see what the tides are going to do too. If you're saying, hey, where are the fish going to fall out of? You can sit there and play with the tide adjustments a little bit.
Pretty cool.
And lastly, it's just a couple drying areas, you know, for those looking for redfish. Any of those green areas you see are areas that become drying areas or mud bottom. Then when that tide comes up, those fish are going to run the edges of that or they're going to get right on top. Very easy to identify, bright green, can't miss them. And that's what I've got for today.
Awesome. Yeah. And so I'd have quite a couple questions though on as far as kayakers. We do have a lot of kayakers and just flat out just people love inshore fishing. But how do we use this system to like track, you know, almost like a GPS unit to track coordinates, like cookie crumbs, if you will. Like if somebody's taking a kayak back in like 10,000 Islands or something like that. I know I haven't personally used it, but I know I've heard of a lot of kayakers using this as a way to find their way back, just for a safety.
Not a problem. I'll see if I can pull this up on, throw this on my video camera here. So this is, let me get to somewhere here. So this is the Navionics app right here. So that's on my phone. So what you are able to do at the very bottom here, you can see the little button that says start. If you hit that start button there, and it's probably backwards in the video, but the green button then, the green button actually will activate a tracking, so it'll draw as a little breadcrumb line as you're going. Now, the nice part on the Navionics app, especially for kayakers, is our app does work without a GPS signal. So as long as you've got the area downloaded first, it's then on your phone. It doesn't have to reach out to the internet to pull down new data. As long as you've got it accessed, you can be up in the middle of the Everglades where there is absolutely no phone signal whatsoever, and you'll be able to track and use this map. On top of which, to your point on waypoints, you know, if you wanted to, you can actually tap on the app. It pulls up that little question mark there. Then once I tap on that, I can actually go ahead and create a marker. I can mark that spot as a GPS waypoint, and then I can always come back to it anytime I want. I can draw a route to it, and I can save it. And it literally becomes a nice little handy GPS for $10.
That's cool. And so I assume when you're doing those waypoints, if you are, say you're in a kayak and you were in one spot, you can get on the map, click a button, and then it'll tell you what the distance is to it. So, hey, I want to paddle this point. How far is it? You know, 2 miles or 3 miles. You can do what we call, there's two options. There's a little compass down the bottom here. Now that little compass, we hit on that and that pulls up a couple pins. Well, I can draw those pins and that'll give me the distance from, you know, one location to another. I can also go ahead and do what we call an auto route. So there's comes up, you hit the route and it says automatic. Again, I know it's backwards on the screen, but you can hit that and that'll actually draw you the fastest route to where your waypoint is and where you want to go. So if you're not familiar with how to go, especially if you're in a boat, now, you know, even more importantly, you can set your draft and say, hey, I don't want to run anywhere that's less than 2 feet. It'll show you exactly where to go to stay within that 2 foot depth. Oh, that's cool as well. I did not realize they had that. So what else was there? Yeah, as far as, so you mentioned the GPS system. How about on the tides? That's one question, one thing I noted down. This does have all the tides incorporated, right? Do you have to select the region or is it based on, it'll just show you whatever's closest? I know there's different.
It'll show you wherever you zoom around, you can see the tides, or of course, if you're closest, so your tide station right there, this is near me and Stewart currently, there's a little red tide station. If I tap on that and hit the, put the little crosshairs on it, that will pull up in Jensen Beach here. That'll pull up the tides. It'll show you the swings, and you can follow that all the way through on what your tides are going to do.
That's pretty cool. It's kind of like a one-stop shop thing.
Everything's on there. Wind, you want to see what the weather's doing, the wind is on there. You can search marinas. This is one thing I think that's actually cool too is, you know, if you're back there, especially kayakers, and you see an area that, you know, you're catching fish off this particular mangrove, there's actually a camera feature on here. And if you hit that camera, it turns on the camera of the phone, and it's up in this corner right here. That'll actually geo-reference that photo to the exact spot that you're at. So if you're like, okay, I know this particular point, you know, looks like that point, you can literally take a picture of it with your phone. It'll drop that camera icon specifically on that lat log. And then you can always go back and hit it. So you're paddling up, you know you're close. Okay, let me see that picture again. Tap on it, pull up that photo and go, oh, that's it right there. Or that's that dock that I was fishing. Because maybe you forget, you haven't been back there in 6 months. You can take a picture of the dock and know exactly where you were that day. Pretty cool.
Yeah, so again, this is the power of technology to just help get the edge over the fish. That's fantastic. I appreciate the tutorial. Nice. Yeah, I'm a real shallow guy, so I'm used to using just the actual, you know, satellite imagery. But as far as you know, the extra benefits of the chart locator and all that, that's pretty solid. And just to be clear, this is available from just a phone, right? You can use just a smartphone, and you can have it into synced up to a depth finder.
Yeah, if you've got a GPS, we make the charts for it's available at any major retailer or on our website. You can check there. And then, yeah, if you've got an iPhone, it's just the iTunes store. If you've got a Droid, it's just through Google Play, and it's $10. You get the whole US.
Cool, awesome. Well, yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, really appreciate you spend the time to walk us through it. A lot of this was new to me, so this is pretty awesome, and I will definitely be getting this on my phone. Especially again, just the safety route. I'm gonna do a lot more traveling, and so it would just be nice to have just to know that if I do get out of cell range for whatever reason, then I can rely on this, because that is one bad thing about the Google map that I use on my phone is if I don't have cell reception, I can't see anything. So that is a really good benefit.
You got it. And thanks for the opportunity to teach a little bit more about contours. I mean, that is without question anywhere I go, whether it's boat shows or, you know, fishing shows or even online, it's always, what do these lines mean? So I appreciate the opportunity to help educate people a little bit more and help them catch more fish out there.
Yeah, the really cool thing is that the same principles apply whether it's a foot of water or 10 feet of water or 100 feet of water, right? Or even more. It's any sort of structure, any sort of break in the current is often going to trigger a holding zone. It's all about positioning, right? Knowing how to position and how to read it. And yeah, that's fantastic. So it's good info. So yeah, so anybody, if you have any questions, there'll be a comment section down below. Feel free to leave a comment. We'll get back to you as soon as possible. Otherwise, yeah, thank you so much for watching, and we hope you can get out on the water and catch some big ones.
There's something about the water that'll give you peace, all by yourself or with your family. Live salt strong and wear the line today.